Hello, I'm going to talk today about what philosophy means to me and why I got interested in philosophy in the first place, and that's about it really. So I'll just try and do this off the top of my head. I'll try and just stream the entire fucking stream of consciousness as to why I even started thinking about philosophy and what philosophy is to me basically. So I was going to study philosophy. I never did though. I went to study computer science because I needed money. My dad advised me to do that, and that's why I took that path. And I'm also an unemployed programmer now, so if you have any work, I'd appreciate getting some money. I do need some work. I need to do something. I need to earn money, I need to earn income. Unfortunately, though, I live in the UK where the economy is knackered because of a war that's going on, which, well, not just because of that, but that's like a longer, complicated economic, political discussion, which I can't be asked to go into the intricate details of, even though I can sort of understand quite a lot of it. But I can't be bothered because the politics is just the refuge for, I don't know, like businessmen, weak men, really. I don't know, women. Well, just, I don't know, whatever. Well, we need democracy, obviously, but democracy is essential in society. We can't have tyrants and totalitarian regimes. That's a big part of the problem that we also have in this world at present. Is that basically, most of the world is just run by people who don't know what they're doing. Most politicians should just be essentially just, I don't know, like, they should represent, I don't know, I've got ahead of myself. So what I was talking about there is like the ideas of democracy in general come from essentially the early Greek civilization. The origins of civilization as we understand it today are from Greece, right? So Socrates was essentially sort of modern ancient world shitposter who just went around asking everybody. If anybody asked them a question, then he would reflect it back to them and say, but why? So that the Socratic method is basically just the infinite regression of asking why questions on and on and on and on and on. And that's what philosophy is. Philosophy is obviously the foundations of science. So the scientific epistemology is a word for a body of knowledge. So philosophy in terms of like the origins of philosophy in the Western Hemisphere are essentially just the theory of knowledge, and all that goes back to Socrates, really, essentially. So Socrates was killed because he asked too many questions. So that's the origins of philosophy. So asking questions, apparently, in the ancient Greece society, they didn't like that, so you'd have to kill yourself, basically. And he did. He just was like, yeah, fuck you. From that, Plato wrote the Republic, because I read much of as one of the first philosophy books I actually started reading. Where he posited the idea of philosopher kings, which is a sort of plutocracy, I suppose. It's like, basically the most intelligent people, but then in those times it would have been men, would rule. So that's a bad idea, obviously. Fucking hell, Plato. It's a terrible idea. Why the fuck did you have that idea? That's just a stupid idea. Because there's not actually democracy then, is it? It's fucking tyranny. It's just a tyranny of the intelligence. Sort of like what in the modern day we might call that technocracy. So it's like the rule of technocrats. Essentially we have the same thing in the world now. We have the big tech organizations, which are essentially just, including the website I'm uploading this video on. It's just technocracy. We live in a technocratic society, essentially, now. Anyway, one of the more interesting figures from the Greek Cynics, who I've been exploring a bit more recently, actually, is Diogenes the dog, who was a cynic. He would go up to... he lived in a... he was essentially like a homeless person. Yeah, Diogenes lived in squalor. He was... he rejected material wealth in Greek society. He spat in the face of Alexander the Great. The famous thing that's always around about Diogenes is that he went up to So Plato is doing some sort of with his followers. He's basically doing a debate or something, and he was saying, "What is a man?" And Diogenes just threw a chicken in the middle of there, like, "Behold the man!" So he's a bit of a, again, like a sort of ancient shit poster, essentially. He was a cynical person. So cynicism is cynicism is all about doubting power, institutional power, as a way of, sort of like saying, you're going to get this wrong. In any body of knowledge that you try and build, there is always going to be a gremlin in the system, as it were. Fast forward to some other philosophers who I found interesting, who I actually find interesting. So Nietzsche has been a big one. Obviously, I've talked about Nietzsche a great deal. The most misunderstood philosopher of all time. So I've already covered many videos where I talk about why Nietzsche was misunderstood, or was misunderstood, by a certain moustached bastard from Germany, a failed Austrian painter who went bloody nuts. And, we all know the story of what happened there, right? It's not a story, it's history. So basically, Nietzsche's whole idea was the ubermensche. It was the transvaluation of value. So you have to constantly reinvent it. It's like a lot of people consider Nietzsche a nihilist of sorts, but really he wasn't. He was the first post-humanist, essentially. So what his whole ubermensch concept was is a hard to understand idea, but basically it's that the ubermensch is he was also not really he didn't believe in equality. He didn't believe that everybody is intellectually equal. Now, this did not mean that he thought that there was subhumans, as the Nazis had misinterpreted his entire ideas, right? But whatever. That's that. So Nietzsche is interesting. He's an interesting, provoking philosopher. I'm tired of reading him because I've read too much now of it. And he at his worst, he's a bit of a emotional fucking. He feels. Not it's bad to have emotions, but he just is just like whipping himself because a girl didn't like him one time or some shit. Like he asked the girl to marry him. Louis Salome, who became a psychoanalyst, got involved in psychoanalysis, and he just gave up after that point and just went completely nuts. And his sister was basically just everything went to shit. So again, funnily enough, the small glitch in his thinking, in some respect, just misinterpretation. Philosophy, the problem with philosophy, if there is any philosophy, I know I've delved into philosophy, I've written my own philosophy. I wrote a paper on why Nietzsche's Overman ideal is ridiculously flawed. You can read it on my website if you want. No one else visits it, so why not you? I don't know, yeah, I'm also being a bit I don't know. I'm not in a great place at the minute, so obviously I'm going to be a bit standoffish. But yeah, basically there's a paper I wrote a while ago on the Overman ideal and why it's flawed and by its very conception of its idea. Nietzsche is what is considered a continental philosopher. So there's a split in philosophy in the modern school between continental and analytical philosophy. You have figures like logical. So the split in philosophy basically went between logic and creativity, essentially. So you got figures like Heidegger, another fucking Nazi bastard. He was boring shit. I never even bothered reading it. I read some of it at university when I was in college, but I just found it tiresome. I was like, what does this even mean? Mainlander is interesting, even though he was a suicidal philosopher, one of the darkest philosophers of all time, probably, because what Mainlander did was he actually wrote his philosophy of redemption and then actually took his philosophy to a horrendous logical conclusion and killed himself and he actually had he got a rope and he put the rope around his neck and he hung himself with the books that he'd actually written, which detailed his philosophy, right? So he killed himself for his philosophy, and its metaphysics is essentially that God kills itself to create the world, right? So that essentially, this is all just, we live in a decaying universe. We are the decaying body of God. That is his primary metaphysics, which is a pretty horrendous idea, really, that it's something that's haunted me for a great deal of time, because, you know, once you've read something like that, like, how do you process that, right? Well, obviously the way any philosophy evolves is you have to move forward. Again, going back to Nietzsche, you have to constantly move forward, and evolve in your thinking. Otherwise, yeah, you will get too absorbed in neuroticism, you know, like obsessive rumination. Hegel, of course, is an incredibly important philosopher the main really idea I've understood of Hegel is antithesis and thesis, which is just basically two opposing frameworks or ideas will, out of both the conflict of both those things, something new emerges. That's Hegel's essential metaphysics, without having to read all of it. From Hegel, then you get Marx, who took that and then applied it to the political and social arena. You know, and Marx and Engels generated a lot of writing, which created basically the framework of Marxism, which is, well, most people know what Marxism is, but if you don't, it's basically a way of trying to understand the material forces in the world. It's materialism as opposed to, you know, sort of spiritual idea of the world in one level, but it's also an economic framework to understand capitalism, basically. Marx's major contribution to philosophy was Das Kapital, which is basically a dismantling of capitalism, all the inherent flaws in it, right? The Communist Manifesto was written by Engels and Marx in collaboration, and that, you know, the funny thing about that is that it actually did create, again, glitch in the system. That did have consequences which they would never have thought foreseen. They're dead like 100-something years ago. So that's one of the rough things with philosophy, like, you know. So basically, you write things, you talk about things, and people misinterpret your ideas. You know, things get taken out of context. That's one of the major, like, gremlins, if you will, in really pushing philosophy to a mental edge, and like really trying to push it forwards. The developing a body of knowledge and reflecting and trying to understand the world. Now, obviously, philosophy is separate from science, because science is more like logical positivism, right? It's a way of measurement. It's a measurement of, when the scientific method essentially is, you have a hypothesis, and you have to prove it first. You have to prove its objective reality, as far as we can tell, in regards to how the world is. Now, I've always thought that physics is essentially and I've always thought this and known this really, is that physics is essentially the science for which all other sciences come from, like chemistry, everything. But the cosmology and physics are the fundamental sciences which describe the actual reality of the world, like the laws of physics, which are, as far as we know, most of them are unbreakable. It takes a long time till we can bend them, right? And then thus comes engineering. Engineering being, of course, the application of physics, ideas that come from physics, to actually create change in the world, right? One other philosopher, I'll talk a little bit now because I'm just jumping around, but it's a good thing. Chiron was a Romanian. He's dead now. He did live quite long. Was a Romanian nihilist philosopher, one of the last continental philosophers he's been described as sometimes. His whole, similar to Nietzsche in a way, he sort of like picked up the flame from Nietzsche in some respects. He was a nihilist, definitely. He was a bit miserablist as well, and his thing was that there's no point to life. Anti-religious, again, just like sort of throwing mental Molotov cocktails into every institution of power. Foucault also, I think, does this, but I'm not really familiar with Foucault. I'm not that interested in Foucault because of I don't know, just not that interested in Foucault. In terms of postmodernism, Gilles Deleuze and Guattari are the main postmodernist philosophers I've ever been interested in. Schizoanalysis is a fascinating idea. Anti-Oedipus is which essentially anti-Oedipal complex is, but it comes from a Greek myth. It's about, I don't know, it's a guy fucking his mum or whatever, which obviously roots to Freud as well. Freud is a cocaine-addled crank, Austrian crank. His methods have been just not really taken seriously in the psychoanalytical world anymore, but he was just a cocaine-addled crank, basically. His whole thing was like, we have these, we compartmentalize our complexes, which is, I think, is stupid, right? Everybody has complexes, but his main contribution to philosophy was the idea of the unconscious, right? So we have unconscious repressed forces, but then that's stupid, because I just think, like, if I don't know, look, I don't think I mean, just like doing schizo analysis myself now, basically. Like, if I have a wank, or if I, like, I don't know, if I do something that's supposedly debased, like having a wank, like, I'm not going to repress that. Like, it's just a memory. Like, it's, obviously I don't, like, hyper focus on it, like, but it's just a release of physical energy that has to be released, right? It's like, otherwise, like Bill Hicks says, all of that sperm just gets backed up in the back of your brain, and it drives you mental. So, I'm an open book. I think at most, all philosophy should aspire to be in it for people to be open books, people to talk more openly, people to talk about, we're all just bags of flesh and bone. Like, I am a skeleton with some flesh on it, right? That just wanders around. I have a nervous system, which, I can control to a degree, but I don't know, it's not like, who gives a shit? One of the biggest questions of philosophy and science as well, of course, is determinism of free will. So, are we on a set path that we cannot change, or is there are there forks in the road? My own personal belief is that every nanosecond there are splits in time and space. It's basically, again, even me just talking about this stuff, people are going to think I'm crazy, right? This is called philosophy. It's asking questions. There's no answer at the end of all this. It's just me asking questions, because I know as soon as I post this up, people are going to say, "Oh, you're not well." I'm fine. I'm just asking questions. Why can nobody get on the fucking path of just understanding shit? Like, anyway, what the fuck? What was I talking about? Basically, like, so fucking hell. There's determinism is that, your life, your energy has one path in life. You will end up in one place. Obviously, there's life, and then there's death, and yeah. So, but you only have one life, which also relates to Nietzsche's idea of the eternal recurrence, right? So, the idea of the eternal recurrence is that you just basically live the same life again and again and again. There's never any change, any variation. You have one life. This is why one of the fundamental pillars in a lot of ways of the atheist movement, which really came into true, fruition, if you will, in the late 20th century, especially after the horrors of the Second World War. How could people stop believing in God? Because, there was a Holocaust, 6 million people died, there's all the soldiers that died, we had the worst failed artist in the world take control of Germany, and then try and expand his stupid tyrannical empire by invading Poland. And this guy was just a fucking mediocrity who, wanted to create some stupid eugenics idea of a perfect human being, which is a thing that can never exist, because nobody is perfect, you dumb fuck. I hope he's burning in hell. Not that there is a place, I don't believe in it, but he's just dead. He's dead now, thank fuck. He's dead. He's not even existing in reality, so that's good. So Hitler's dead, which is good. But yeah, basically, I don't know where to go. And that's just a bit of just freewheeling all the things that go through my head at the minute. Anyway, I don't care. I'll share a little bit. But yeah, in terms of like I'm a bit anxious at the minute. I need to get back onto medication. I just need to chill out a bit because like it's been again like I've got all this energy going on my head about what just like obsessive thinking. I just need to calm my head down a bit. I thought I'd just get all this philosophy out of my head, so that just go first thoughts from the video for a while. No one will watch it because I swear, and unfortunately, like a lot of these technocratic tech platforms still do want to control speech. I haven't said it's anything particularly offensive, but undoubtedly I'll be shadow banned because in a lot of ways I think we need to control it. We as in like people who have engineering ability or like developers, we need to take back control of the reins of this. There needs to be free speech. Obviously there needs to be free speech. Free speech, I think, is one of the fundamental problems in the contemporary world. Obviously, you can't. Free speech doesn't mean you can just go into a crowded theatre and go fire if there's no fire, because that's retarded. Obviously, Christopher Hitchens has explained this. Just watch the clip and understand it. But basically, yeah, if you have, if you can't, it's always like it relates also to the boy who cried wolf. So there's a story about the boy who cried wolf. He would go around saying there's a wolf, and it was all a practical joke, right? Go to the village and say there's a wolf, and there's no wolf, and everyone died. And then one time there was a wolf, and then the wolf killed him. Right? That's a interesting example of why with speech, any speech that you use, you have to use it with care. You can't just go like for example, I wouldn't go up to just like a random person, a stranger in the street, and go, "You're a cunt," because that's just ridiculous. Like, it's absurd. And also, a lot of people find that word offensive, right? A lot of people find the C word offensive. I call it the C bomb. It is just a word, right? Cunt can be used in many different ways. It can be used as a colloquial term. Like I've got bored of trying to explain this to people. It's a linguistic thing, right? Cunt can be used as a term of endearment. Like where I'm from in Congo, cunt is used as a friendly term. Like, I'm not even joking. It's a term of endearment amongst friends. But it's not a word you just go up to random people and say cunt. You don't just do that. Cunt, yeah, you're cunt. You can use it like that as a friendly way, but it has to be somebody you actually know. You can't use it towards women as well. That's just you can if you want. Obviously, but then it has ramifications for that, and she'll probably kick you in the balls. So don't call women cunts. Yeah. That's that. In terms of philosophy, I need to I've got a copy of Wittgenstein, but I'm not reading it. It's way up there in Scotland. Still, I'm staying on my boat at the minute. I'm going back to my parents' house soon, so I'm gonna have some time out just to chill, get back on my meds, and just anyway. If you found this interesting, it's good. I'm an unemployed philosophy programmer, painter, artist, poet, writer, publisher. So I don't know if anyone knows of any jobs where I can combine all these talents into one thing, where I can just get paid for doing it. That would be appreciated. Otherwise, I don't know. I don't care. I need money, obviously, but I don't know. Whatever. Bye. Like and subscribe if you found any of this interesting. Though I imagine probably 50% of you or 80% of you probably tuned out already because you don't like swearing or whatever.